It's Jen Suzuki, and I'm in the industry. I meet some of the greatest leaders out there, dealer execs, dealers, GMs, and I'm bringing them in the studio to talk to me about what's making their business pop, what's accelerating their growth. I'm sharing my own personal strategies for your sales teams, so I'm ready to get after it. Are you? Welcome back, everybody. The UAW strike, it's been unfolding for about a month now, and the industry is yet to see a notable decline in inventory despite the manufacturing disruptors caused by the union. While it's not clear the extent of which OEM profit margins have been affected over the last 3 weeks, I did read that General Motors is claiming that on Wednesday it already lost $200 million. Is that what you've seen, maybe, Tom, too?
Yeah, it's a big number.
Okay.
Big number.
And I'll introduce Tom here in just a second. But since the start of the strike, we're starting to see some of these impacts with some manufacturers. And anyways, I want to go. I've got two great guys here on the show with me today. And Tom Gage, he is a chief strategy officer and data analytics for Lotlinx. He's doing a lot of market analysis. And I just recently saw him on CBT News. I'll share a little bit about that with you in a minute. But I really wanted to hear some of his perspectives today, because it's a little bit different than what I hear from other people that are talking about the strike and the impacts. And then I brought my friend and my colleague, Dave Hefko, Vice President, Partner, GM of Carousel Motors in Minnesota. He's with us here today. So welcome. Welcome, Tom. Welcome, Dave.
Yeah, glad to be here today.
Yes. So strike, it impacts everybody differently. I know, Carousel, you've got a lot of different brands there, probably not seeing huge impacts because you've got the brands that have a ton of inventory. But I'm curious to get some perspective on the impacts internally in the dealership. Tom, his background is data science, analytics. He's going to share some insights about the strike and the EV movement. And then we've got Dave Hefko. He's going to share perspective on and exchange some ideas on different perspectives from the dealerships, the brands, current events, and how maybe we can use what's going on in the industry now to help us prepare, even be ready to handle customer behavior, which we're used to doing. So thank you guys for being here. Maybe, Tom, you could tell me a little about data analytics, your experience, maybe a little on assessing the market changes right now in the auto industry.
Yeah. So I work with a very large data sets and everything. It's, I used to think at my former company that it was like one of the largest type of data sets to work with. And I found, great attraction coming over to Lotlinx because actually they turned out they had more of a lot of other things. And in fact, on a daily basis, we're capturing every price move and every sale of virtually every unit that's listed for sale at franchise dealers across the country. And at the same time, actually, we're capturing behavioral data by consumers and their intent to buy. And it's not just like, the typical websites and or dealer websites or Facebook or what's happening on like Google search. It's across like over 1,000 websites. And so with that detailed data, knowing actually what's happening locally within the market and what's happening nationally in the market on the supply side and inventory price movements, and then also seeing what the consumers are doing on the other side, it allows you actually to take a good look of actually how economic conditions or things like the strike are impacting our business. But you know what? Just talking about data and looking at it is meaningless unless you act on it. So, one of the things I'm adamant about, having grown up in the auto space, is that you need to act on it. If you're just saying, hey, day supply is increasing, what do you do about it? It doesn't really tell you actually what to do next. And so I think what I find exciting about my career now is actually how do I actually maximize profitability for dealerships around the country? And that's my single focus.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm guessing you've been evaluating some market trends right now, especially when it comes to the strike. Yeah, it's been going on for everybody's talking about it. I think we're kind of tired of it.
Dave, you would actually agree. Have you actually been, you went through the cash for clunkers period, and the chip shortage and all that stuff. Have you ever seen actually anything as crazy as what we have in today's environment?
I think it's all crazy. It's just different crazy,
Yeah,
and so I'm not sure. I mean, it's the car business. It's America. It's how we operate, and keeps it exciting. Probably keeps it fun. But
yes.
there's challenges. There's always challenges, no matter what. And this is just one more that we'll get through, I think,
Mm-hmm.
without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, resilience. So, Jennifer, it was roughly at the very beginning of September. Uh, I had a bunch of my dealership buddies who were visiting. They were doing a 20 group
Okay.
down at the beach. And, we were having our drinks, cocktails, and we brought up the subject about the UAW strike. And we put money on the table. We actually, they said, okay, strike's probably going to happen, right?
Yes.
And we put money on the table. Then we all put numbers down and said, how long is the strike going to last? And you know what? I nailed that one.
How do you know that already?
And you could see it because I was, looking at a whole bunch of different metrics happening in the industry. One is ramp up of inventory that was leading into like that deadline, right? And it was build up of inventory there. And then other key metrics about, how fast dealers were selling down inventory and how they were adjusting with price movements and stuff like that. And you could actually see that there was enough supply in the network actually to be enough of a buffer right there that there was no reason for the manufacturers to have to give on that. So my first prediction was at least it's going to last at least 30 days minimum before they start to have serious type of talks. And it turned out that actually that was a pretty good forecast just based on that.
Well, I can tell you this, that it feels like we might be getting a little bit closer to it coming to an end. I don't know. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
like Ford's close. I mean, I don't know what that tells us, but I saw you recently on CBT News and I perked up a little bit because a lot of people talk about the strike. It is a complex issue and it's part of today's conversation. I agree. The world is very complicated. Dave says we've always got something going on. But I'd like to hear your assessment because I think one of the things that I really liked when I listened to you on CBT News is the way that you were the way you were talking about how the strike is impacting more than just the automotive sector, but it's something that we can look at and plan ahead regardless if it's inventory or if it's even just dealership process internally, because customers today are going to start asking questions. I mean, Dave, have you
Right.
heard customers ask questions like, how's the strike going to impact our availability, or have you heard customers even say anything?
Oh yeah, they bring it up. It's a regular conversation, and I mean, some are saying, are the prices going to go up or down,
Right.
and that's a real factor. I mean, it would be right now. I was just in a meeting yesterday, and all of the incentives for GM, for instance, ended on the 16th, and the question came up that why would they do that? And that's with all the manufacturers. I said because they're watching it right now, and they're hoping that by this time maybe there would be some consumer sentiment towards, are we going to run out of cars, and it would actually pick up. But the truth is that all three of the manufacturers are trending.
Unknown caller.
So
I don't think that one's me.
Pretty sure that was me. Sorry about that.
All three of the manufacturers, all three of the manufacturers involved in the strike are actually trending flat for this month, and so they keep the incentives going. So there's all these different things, and it's a fluid movement. It's been a bet on a regular basis as far as when it's going to end. And last Wednesday, I guessed that we'd have something in the next 10 days based on what I was seeing, and then they strike at the Kentucky truck plant, and that changed everything. And so now I heard today that Christmas is probably the popular.
What's your assessment,
You
Tom?
know the interesting thing, the part that actually caught me off guard was that it was the first time the strike was very strategic at first. It actually started to hit popular models that consumers really want. You know, it was those mid-sized pickups, and the Bronco, right, was one of the first ones to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, where we're at 144 factories that are impacted, 36,000 employees that are on strike. So, the scale's a little bit bigger and everything else. But again, you still have to look at, from a dealership's perspective, we actually want to be selling, those popular makes. That's where they're making money at the most part. But then it broadens out a little bit, but we still have buffer in the system. So you can see that actually just the other day, Ford starting to actually get a little bit more serious about negotiating and talking about the impact of the strike. Well, why is that? Actually, it's because if you look at their supply numbers, they have about 7 days or so of supply before they get to what I would consider a 60-day normal day supply buffer, and that's an aggregate. But there's a lot of disparity across their model line, and especially there's a lot of disparity at different price points within that. So when you look at actually it in aggregate and look at hear what the news is talking about, they're talking about aggregate numbers of how it impacts the manufacturers. And I'd rather actually slice that a totally different way and say that of the things that are happening in our economy and so forth, how is that actually impacting dealerships, and actually what is it that's happening that the dealership can control? So most of the dealerships I know, if you actually look at those aggregate numbers, they are running on new cars actually less than a 60-day supply, which is not really ideal. That means it impacts consumer choice. It also impacts their flexibility in, how much gross they actually want to pick. So that's on, the new car side, but things really change up quite a bit actually on a model line level. And so this is where other economic conditions and factors are really starting to play in. The strike is, and most of my friends are, in the dealership space are saying, okay, great, but I can't control that. And they're not as much as maybe concerned about it than other things. Affordability and overall volume of units in the marketplace are much, much bigger issues at the moment. And like what our data is showing is that ever since that Fed rate increase on July 1st, I can't tell you how damaging I think that rate increase was to our industry. But it took some lag in the system actually for it to really manifest itself. But you can actually see not only in what's happening at the consumer level, but you can also see it in actually what's happening at the inventory level, that consumers are starting to switch over from choices of new cars to used cars. And it's almost proportional, that difference. And what gets me is the price increases that have been happening on the used car side. Sometimes there's only a 15% difference or so in price point between new and used. Yet consumers, for sentiment reasons and things, are opting to go to used. So we have affordability is a major factor. And, you look at the time period from July, it takes, a month or so or 2 months for the consumer to start to see the impact of that in their credit card bills and what they think they can afford. And they go into the dealership and, the deal desk says, hey, you're going to be at 9.5% or 11% or something like that. That scares people. And they say, what are my other options and things? So, Dave, actually, I think you're probably seeing affordability issues probably having a greater impact on, your parts of the business than actually this thing with the strike. Would that be accurate?
Well, we've seen that really since last July in the domestic brands. The volume slowed, and there's been economic issues of other kinds that have affected our business. So it all comes down to, it all comes down to, for us, is consumer sentiment, our employee sentiment, where they're at with,
Mhm.
in an everyday thing. We have enough inventory
Right.
across all our brands. Really, there isn't any shortage of inventory at this point in time, and it's not. But we're not over inventoried either in new or used vehicles, and I think that's just good management on our leaders' part. And but at the end of the day, it really comes down to, on all these things, how the consumers feel. One of the things I think that's really changed over the last 10 days, when you ask the question, are customers talking about it, are
Yes.
employees talking about it,
Mm.
is um, the other things that it's just like any other news cycle item. And I wonder how much that affects this strike, because all of a sudden you have, the catastrophe in the Middle East that's going on right now. That takes over the news cycle, and and nobody's talking about the strike. There's nothing, there's nothing out there. I mean, Bill Ford. I don't think it was by accident that Bill Ford gave the speech instead of Jim Farley or somebody else yesterday. Because they're trying to get some attention, and it's
Mhm.
the same thing with the UAW. Now, that's that all makes a big difference. People aren't talking about the UAW strike, and that that's not good. That's not good for either side.
I would agree with that totally. 10 days ago when we did that last recording, I actually really said, it's the volume of units, at least in certain segments and price points, and affordability is really the chief issues. But then you throw this monkey wrench in, and almost overnight, we started to see actually changes in consumer sentiment happening online with activity. You can actually see almost within the hour of the announcement of that disaster, as you called it, Dave, that you can actually see almost within the hour actually a change in consumer behavior and a softening of demand almost immediately.
Hmm.
Um, and as Dave said, it really takes a little bit of time for consumers to kind of digest and come to a place that they feel more confident about things. And I think actually one of those confidence things again was, opening up credit card bills and looking, oh my gosh, actually this is what I'm up against right here. So it takes a little bit of time for them to digest things. So again, I'll center it back actually to what is it that a dealership can control, right? They can't control actually the inbound inventory, at least in the new side. Um, Not at all, really. They're essentially, you have to grab, especially if you're an Asian brand, day supply of Toyotas, Kias, Subarus in the marketplace is insanely low at the moment. And so, that side of the business, they're going to grab every piece of inventory that they can get on the new car side. And how that impacts it, every extra new car that they get actually is potentially a new trade they get and another car they have on the used car side. So it's definitely impacting their side of the business. The other part of actually the strike and the sentiment part of it is, consumers walk in the store. I talked to
Mhm.
a dealership just only 20 minutes ago, CDJR, and you know they're asking about the strike as well, and they're saying, well, if you don't have the car I'm going to go get, instead of buying this car, I'm going to go over and get the Asian version that's a cheaper price point. Well, the bottom line is those cars aren't there. They don't have an option actually to switch brands and things. So, there's some. I saw a lot of things on NBC and other stations there. They're saying, oh, consumers are going to start to defect from the big three. Guess what? They don't have anywhere else to go. They don't
Mm.
have anywhere else to go except for to actually try to get used cars that are equivalent and everything else. Dave, I don't know if you agree with me on that, but there certainly can't be jumping ship in mass anyway to, say, Asian brands or European brands.
Yeah, I couldn't. I mean, I really couldn't answer that. something we deal with. I mean, and we can look at Hyundai and Kia moved into the number 4 position for automakers in the United States. That was a surprise to me, and so and they're all being made here in this country. So
Yes.
that's also a factor. I think people that are shopping for domestic brands, we see it across our brands that if they're shopping at our CDJR store, or they're shopping at our Ford store, or they're shopping at our Chevrolet store, in this day and age, the way things are, they're looking for a CDJR, they're looking for a Jeep, they're looking for a Ford, they're really, they might dip their toe in, they might be looking at a Wrangler and a Bronco, but at the end of the day, they kind of made up their mind, and they are looking for affordability. You are right about that. And
Yeah.
that has been a factor more because of the lease market being down. And now one of the things that's driving is that, everybody wants to spur business and leases are getting better. Ford is pushing flex buys, it's payments for most consumers. And that's what we run into most often. If we can get them into a new car, and we can get them in a payment that they can live with comfortably and feel good about, it still comes down to they're just happy to get in a new vehicle. And,
Yes.
and really, no matter what brand they're coming after, in what model or anything else, they're all the same. It's all about the experience. I mean, so that's why we have, fantastic training of our sales staff every week with Jen Suzuki to keep them in that, because it's, as she teaches, it's all about connection, and we have to work on that. This strike, whether it's inventory or not inventory, I worked for a guy for a long time, and one of his lines I always remember is he'd say, "Tell me about your inventory problem when you've sold your last car." That always comes up. We've dealt with inventory issues for the last 3 years.
Years.
Right.
I've got 2 storage lots that have been empty since 2021. So they used to be full. That's
Right.
it's going to be the same thing no matter what's going on. I don't think that if the strike ends tomorrow, that it's going to change our business drastically one way or the other. Now, if the strike lasts until Christmas, as a lot of people are calling for right now, and and I have seen this. I mean, here's the issue: is I personally feel like I would, if I were going to go out and if I were an expert in data, what the data I'd really like to see, Tom,
Yes.
is how the people who are striking feel, because we're getting, the head of the union, who I think, they're pretty boisterous about what they want to accomplish, and they're trying to get the spotlight in his, Facebook feeds and media and everything else, and we're getting the manufacturers. And I think, I personally feel that the union members have every right to, try to get more in wages and everything like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We have union stores and we have non-union stores, and that's okay. But I think right now everything's too focused on the head of the UAW, Fain, and the manufacturers talk. I'd like to hear what the workers, because they're the ones that are paying the price. And when I talked to, I was just with our own union steward at one of our stores yesterday, and he brought up the conversation. He said, what do you think? And you walk gingerly in those areas, and so what do you think? And he said, well, I just think they're nuts. A 46% increase in a 32-hour work week for 40 hours, and he just went on and on and on. And he's our union steward. I wonder how much of that is filtering down. And I feel bad because we're getting to a point where, look, if I am if I'm Ford exec or GM exec or anybody else, I'm going to start looking at the fact that, all right, if if I end this, how long is it going to take me to get these plants back open?
Right.
How close is that going to be to the holidays?
Mm-hmm.
And we're off. We're going to close down for 2 weeks over the holidays anyway,
Mm.
and I'm not going to have to pay that out.
Mm.
Um, and that's going to make it tough on the. That's going to make it tough on the workers. So I think at the end of the day, that it, more attention has to be paid to that sentiment because they're the ones.
Actually, I really like your line of thinking right there.
They're the ones that are trying to live on $500 a week, or unemployment, or are trying to drive Uber or delivering pizzas to pay their bills.
About 36,000 people. But the other perspective on that is, how many employees do dealerships or franchise dealers in the country employ? And
Mm.
the staggering numbers, like 2 million. And so, eventually you have to actually think, well, how does that impact the economy and things? But what you're also leading into there is, how long does it take actually to ramp up and get the supply chain back in order, right? So let's say that strike lasts 45 days or so. It's still at least another 45, 90 days, actually probably 90 days before even things start trickling through, because it takes the parts and everything else actually and not only the manufacturing, but it takes that whole supply chain a long time and to get going. Then you actually could load cars onto trains and stock them appropriately, get them distributed around the country. So it's at least 90 days. So I kind of also like where you started out that part of the conversation, which is it's all about the sales teams. And from what I see, I can only talk about the data part of it. But what I see is there's a lot of different scenarios down to the model level and the brand level going on here, in terms of volume of units and affordability and so forth. And having clear conversations with the sales team and so forth is so important. And I'll give you like an example, like two main things I'm seeing. When I look at actually what's happening on like day supply and sales to stock ratios and sell down rates and things like that, and discounting by price point, by brand, almost across the board, seeing major slowdowns in the $50,000 to $80,000 price brackets. And this is especially true with coupes and high-end type of pickups. And I can't say why that's happening, but I think it is related to affordability that's hitting the marketplace. And so I see buildup of inventory happening in those segments at the moment. So then on the other hand, you actually have other models that are actually running shorter of supply. And if you extend the strike and then ramp up period out, say another 90 days or so, there's constraints there. So I think if I can conjecture, having training with the team and saying, okay, hold the line on margins on these units, but on these ones right here, have some concern. And I have a follow-up on that after you comment on it.
Do you see a slowdown in those areas too, Dave?
I think we're seeing a slowdown.
50 to 80?
Yep, we have seen a slowdown in pickup trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Across the board, but the discounting continues. It's always been so. The discounts just become bigger. Manufacturers have extra money on pickups right now. All of them do, in order to move them, and so it'll just adjust down. I think a lot of it has to do with who that consumer is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's a lot of it has to do with the economy and what's going on. And an uncertainty about that. Whether you brought up the rate increase, if they don't, if there's a stop to the rate increases, I think it'll change.
Yes, you have a little more stability in the marketplace. Do you know what's really interesting is I have been looking at actually what's happening above 100K. And you know what?
They're
They're
selling.
moving. They're still moving. And the
Right.
crazy part about it is
Our
like,
luxury brands are
Booming.
having great months. Yep.
Yeah.
yeah,
He's having a great month this month.
but it's only that 50, below 50K, they seem to be moving. And so that's why I keep the indicators to me is those are discretionary purchases where affordability is really playing in.
Mm-hmm.
So we just only about a week ago, I was looking to see actually what's happening with the Ram 1500s versus Silverados, and they're both running about the same day supply. And in this situation, the Ram 1500s had money on metal and a little bit more discounting on the Silverados, and you could actually almost see the brakes in the Florida market actually, really hitting hard on those Silverados. So the importance of factory money in those cases seems to definitely come into play there.
Mm-hmm.
If it's used properly. What are you hearing from your salespeople and managers, et cetera, Jen?
Mm-hmm.
Are they talking much about this whole strike situation as if it's a big deal, or is it a non-issue?
It's mixed across the board, and I think it has to do with the brands that are being impacted probably the most. But I would say in general, I find a lot of salespeople have no idea there's even a strike.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I've been around, to the different stores, and I try to make sure I talk each week about what's going on to answer questions and things like that. And that's one subject. Nobody asks any questions.
Nobody get,
Like,
yeah.
whatever.
That actually was the key point of actually the conversation I had 2 weeks ago is I was going, you know what, that's not the big issue right now. Actually, biggest issue, again, is you nailed it. It's partly affordability, part of it
Yes.
volume of units.
Yeah.
And you throw in the monkey wrench of latest news things and consumer sentiment. Consumer sentiment, that's actually what I was worried about with the strike. If the strike actually was making a lot of noise every day, all of a sudden you actually start to see a change in consumer sentiment, and they actually could
For
either
sure.
rush into the store and start
Mhm.
buying stuff,
Mhm.
or say, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to wait. They clearly don't have what I want and stay out. So sentiment actually has a lot more to do with our business than I think people kind of think.
I was kind of shocked. My neighbor, he just bought a truck, and he said to me, well, I said, "Oh, you got a new truck?" And he said, "Yeah, I had to get in there before because they put that plan on strike, and this was going to be like the last. We didn't know if I was going to get the truck that I wanted, And I was like, that is shocking. I can't even believe my
Right.
neighbor just said that. But I mean, it's by brand. People know what's going on. Salespeople, I always say to them, I say this. I say you got to have these conversations because a lot of times when they're in the dark and when customers do have questions, they are seeing. I hear customers ask questions about it, and or even forget about the strike. I mean, people have questions about, is Rivian going to still exist in 5 years? You know what I mean? And
Mm.
and in contemplating their choice in their next vehicle. And anyway, if the salespeople don't know what's going on, then they look like they look stupid. They don't know what they're talking about, and then it's hard to make those connections, build those relationships, be that person that people want you to be, when they make their vehicle decision. But I would go back to this. I say to salespeople all the time, you navigate what you got to navigate. But the truth is that we've had an affordability problem for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, okay, you're right. Like, 2 years ago, I never seen so many $1,000 a month car payments in my life. Everyone had $1,000 a month car payment. Then, things have changed. Now, when I just had this conversation with a sales team today, I'm like, we keep losing this one customer. She's on a $45,000 car. She keeps saying the price is too high. She's been doing this for 4 months, dragging these people through the coals. I said, First off, we should be asking better questions in our sales process. We need to be asking better questions to understand the customer situation. We need to understand people are flexible today because they are in affordability situation. And before that, it was availability issue. And
Mm.
so, having needs assessment questions ready to go, asking the right questions to figure out real true needs and wants, trying to figure out, what we can show them that are options. This is a customer service issue more now than ever, in my opinion, and helping customers really navigate, the complexity of the environment, whether it's availability or it's affordability. We got to ask better questions to show them options. I always tell salespeople this: oh, why are you showing them one car, the car they're asking you about? This is a 2-car environment. We should be showing them we should be showing them prices on more than one car, so that we actually have a opportunity to move something forward. Because of course they're going to say the payment's high. They always say the payment's high. But let me show you what it costs you to get the car you want. Let me show you show you what kind of car you're going to get for that money that you think this should be.
And when I'm looking at the pricing data and actually I'm seeing a 15% spread, I'm going, okay, when does it really make sense actually that you really need to be in a used car? The price of things, in the short term, through the end of the year, there's no other option than prices of vehicles are going to go up, except for I would think that those areas like the pickups and so forth that we talked about, that the luxury versions of them that need to move a little bit faster, right? But except for that and everything else, prices are going to go up. Profits should go up, right? Accordingly, hopefully, if we're buying right. So the bad part about the strike thing is everybody's enjoying a little bit of a boom because it's basically caused by a shortage of supply overall, and that time will pass in a year or two, right? At some point. And I'm sorry, but to ask for permanent changes based on current profitability numbers is, you can see in the data and things that we go through cycles, long-term cycles and things. Anyway, just a side point right there. I didn't mean to get into the politics of what they should do or not do.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying, though.
I think both sides. I think the bigger thing is, both sides have something to lose here, because one of the issues is the longer this goes, the parts problems become more difficult. People who have vehicles on order, who ordered vehicles and expected them this month, and they're not going to get them this month, are going to become they're going to become angry, because they do.
And they're going to fall out, and they're going to switch brands, and they're going to find something else.
And they're going to
not going to switch brands much.
And they're going to say, but they're going to start saying, they shouldn't be striking, or the manufacturers should end this, aren't giving enough, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, that piece. And then and the striking workers, that's where, if I were a striking worker right now, and just in this conversation I had yesterday with our union steward at one of our stores, I'm thinking, okay, if I were striking, and I'm going, hey, they offered a 26% increase, and they've offered this, and they've offered this, and they offered this, and you're saying no, and I got bills to pay. I thought this was going to be, short term. I'm going to start. I'd be starting to think about that. I'd like to hear what their sentiment is. I would. At this level, at the retail level, it's all about. There's so many things that change, and the whole affordability thing, and so my daughter bought a car on Saturday, and my daughter, all my kids have worked in the car business. She just was like, okay, well, just tell me when there's a good deal.
Oh, you mean she didn't negotiate with you?
She doesn't have to. And anyway, so I said, okay, last week I said, okay, it's time to move. You're going to get a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Okay, that's the deal right now, and it's going to be perfect for what you want. We're going to get your payment that you want and everything like that. Okay, great. So she's in on a Jeep Grand Cherokee. She's trading in her Ford Edge, and I don't, I just give it to our used car guy, say, put a number on this car and get all done. She's picking up the car on Saturday, and we go out to lunch while they're getting it cleaned up. And she said, you gave me more for my Ford Edge than I paid for it 50,000 miles ago.
Wow. Wow.
Right.
That just shows you what's happening with used car prices.
And there was no, hey, you got to give me a lot of money for this. Hey, what's this worth? I don't, it is what it is. And I went, that's crazy, isn't it? It's 2016 Ford Edge. It had 100,000 miles on it, and she bought it with 50,000 miles, whatever, 4 or 5 years ago. And she said we gave her more than she paid for it.
Yeah, I've heard that quite often. Actually, the average age of the vehicle, on the road today, I always thought it was actually going to start to, hit a peak or something like that, and it's still climbing like a rock. Or not a rock, but it's accelerating almost at the age of vehicles in the United States. Hey, let's talk about,
and I think our service departments feel that.
Right.
And so many of the people in the last couple of years, look, when you talk about pricing, we have all the time in all the brands. You get pickup trucks, and the customer comes in and says, "Hey, my lease is up, and I want to turn this in." And Jen, I know you know this. And we go through, and they had a $499 lease payment.
Now it's $899.
Now to get the whole new truck, it's $899 if they're lucky.
Right.
And they're settling for less options because they raised the prices on the trucks.
Or moving to a used car. Right? Yeah.
Yep.
And I would imagine, I'm noticing a lot of people do that. This is why I'm always telling the salespeople, you can't take everything that you read for face value. That customer calls in, that customer emails you. That's why we have to ask better questions, because we do have all these issues circling.
We briefly talked about EVs for a moment.
Yeah.
So change gears a little bit on that, right?
Well, we certainly have seen the production outweigh the sales now. So I am curious what your assessment is on that.
Well, this is actually probably one of the craziest parts of our industry and everything else, where everybody started to get bought into the whole world is going to convert over to EVs, and everybody starts to rush to actually put them into production and so forth. And you could see very clearly a just about linear ramp up of inventory and on the production side of vehicles in dealer lots that kept on climbing actually all the way through to just about the middle of August of this year. And at the same time, actually look at the rate of EV sales, they're not even on the same path trajectory. The growth rate, actually production versus actually what's available in the marketplace are totally different trajectories. So, this is where, there was a belief by the pundits that everybody's going to hit and buy and convert to EVs. Well, when we look at that actually on a more detailed level, what we're seeing is actually the manufacturer is doing a fairly good job of actually telling the consumers, hey, I now have an EV available in the marketplace, and here's, great things about it. But then actually shortly after that launch, we're starting to see actually a dip in demand on these vehicles. And so we're not seeing, long-term type of improvements that are consistent actually on the demand side of things on the EV market. And, I think the other part that's interesting there is the number of EVs that are actually hitting the market. And, oops, did I lose internet?
No.
Okay, it just froze up. So the number of EVs hitting the market, and I think dealerships are confused. Consumers are confused, actually, what's really available right there. So again, what is it that the dealerships can control? Well, there still is EV buyers in the marketplace, and for those specific vehicles, you have to actually do VIN level type of advertising. Is a try to improve sales. But two is that the consumers you can't assume that they actually even know that, if you're a key dealership, that you even have an EV for sales. Better education on the front end, on the websites and things like that, and with the sales staff is also probably very important now.
I'm curious to hear, Dave, your perspective on this because for me, EVs, it's not for everybody, but it also seems to be a higher price point. The price point we're having a problem with
Right.
in moving, and hence probably why production's outpacing sales. But I also find that a lot of salespeople, they get really disinterested in learning more about the product, understanding, what's pros and cons, how to present it. They'll just be like, "Oh, Dave, oh, he's our EV guy. There you go." And remember how you used to always have your truck guy, push it all over to him. But I think that actually deters what we're trying to do. Because there are plenty of good great cars out there, great customers out there, but I've oftentimes feel like the salespeople don't know how to sell them.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're right about that. It's still, it still comes down to what you do with what you have. So as we bought a Ford store earlier this year, and we're trying to expand that volume. And so one of the areas we could get vehicles and make friends with the manufacturer was to
take the EVs, right?
Take the EVs, and so we took them all. We take a lot of them, and we're selling them. We're selling a disproportionate number of EVs to our IC vehicles all the time, and it's so it's interesting to me. At the time that Ford said they're going to shut down the Lightning plant, we had just had our best month with Lightnings. I'm not complaining. I actually applaud them for doing that, to adjusting production to the output. But I think EVs, I think what changed a lot really was when Toyota said, "Yeah, we're not all in these." I think, when Toyota said we're not going that route, and it kind of stopped everybody in their tracks and said, "Whoa,
It
wait a
did.
minute."
It did actually, and you look at a number of news articles about hydrogen and other alternative fuels, or going hybrid on a bit more. You saw that almost overnight. You're absolutely correct on that one.
And EVs are it's not just a price point, but at this point in time, EVs are a luxury.
Yes.
Everybody I know has an electric vehicle, has another vehicle. That electric vehicle is, it's a novelty. They use it for around town and things like that, but they're going to go on a road trip. They're going to use something else.
For sure.
And, by the way, actually, the other issue clouding things is when they talked about whose charging standards, they're going to gravitate to that, they're trying to coalesce, to that Musk thing or somebody else's, right? And that adds a lot of confusion because consumers know about obsolescence real quick. Oh, I bought this, now I can't do that. So this is why I think that what's interesting is the best in class. I can see, actually, I can measure every dealership around the country, actually, their performance in selling EV vehicles. Then when you dig down into it and you see, wait a second, they're selling through their vehicles much faster than other vehicles. And is it actually related to their brand that they have or whatever? And generally, there isn't a correlation there. So the only conclusion is that dealerships that are actually really selling through their EV inventory are doing really two things. They have a functioning sales team and strategy for selling the vehicles. And two is that they're properly
advertising them.
The vehicles in the marketplace. And they can't treat those vehicles the same as actually their ICE vehicles, or they have to actually put specific demand on those vehicles in the marketplace. Dave, I hopefully you agree with actually the power of having good floor execution.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That makes all the difference in the world and everything. One of the interesting things on EVs, if you want to talk about a shift in the market, I was at a dealer council meeting for one of the manufacturers last couple of weeks ago, and it was brought up that so all of us that have large dealerships have been forced by our manufacturers to put in large charge.
Hmm.
That's right.
And spend, we spend 700,000 to plus per dealership to put in all these chargers and everything else. And we're told, if you don't do this, if you
Right.
don't do all this, you're not going to get EVs. You're not going to be able to fix EVs, et cetera, et cetera. And you remember those fights, the court fights and everything like that were everybody went through. Well, yeah, they're gone. And so now this question came up. Look, I invested $1 million in my dealerships in EVs, and now you're telling me that everybody gets them. And that's just the way the car business is. It's always been that way. It changes. And, I mean, I listen and I go, yeah, I'm in the same boat, but
It is a negotiation, isn't it?
yeah,
Actually, all the time.
it's still, and it still comes down to coming back all the way around. It comes down to consumer sentiment and the experience that they have when they come to the dealership, and that's and whatever, whether it's an EV, it comes down. Getting a new vehicle is an experience, and it's the experience they're looking for. And if they're looking for an EV experience, that's what's going to turn them on.
Hmm.
Right.
It isn't really, all the cars, all the trucks, everything really has parity. I mean, we have better quality vehicles than there ever has been. But the truth of the matter is that it's the customer's looking for a certain experience, just like
Yeah.
they're looking at when they're looking for homes.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, in just kind of tying up this conversation, I got to tell you, I was at this Kia dealership not that long ago, and Sky, he took all the electric vehicles he could get, and now nobody can sell them. Salespeople are not out there. He said, "All right, look, there's a feature on this car that is what separates it from everybody else. It's a remote control. You could do everything on your phone to get the car on, moving, all this stuff." And he goes, "So on Saturday, I went out there and I just started remote controlling the cars around the lot. We sold both cars that day." And I said, that's the spirit of experience.
Right.
People still need to be wow. They still need to feel like, wow, this is special. It's not just like, look, they're not going to like the price. Nobody ever liked the price. When there was a G behind invoice, they did not like the price, So it's like you've got to find a way to get them involved in the attributes to the
So in
car.
my neighborhood, one of the guys just recently bought a brand new, a super green Taycan,
Uh-huh.
Porsche.
Nice.
And, at first there was a little bit of curiosity because a lot of the people in the neighborhood just didn't even know it
What it
was
was.
electric. I mean, it was such a great looking car, right?
Hmm.
And then the word gets out, and then one of them says, "Well, what can you do with it?" Well, the first thing you do is, "Well, let's figure out how many golf clubs bags that we can actually fit in this thing." And he loaded up, a bunch of them right there. Well, all of a sudden, actually, the next weekend, we actually have two more of them in the neighborhood, and it was partly because of first off, they had a great experience at the local store, and then two is they finally actually were conveyed actually the features that they could understand and everything else.
That
And
were relatable to their
then
lifestyle.
the car right
Yeah.
there. This gets back to my key point right here is that with that class of vehicles, especially with that overall arching differentiation between production numbers and supply, demand side of it, that you need to actually have a specific strategy for that handling that. And
I agree.
it boils down to merchandising, presence on your website, communication, and maybe giving your salespeople a gimmick actually to talk about them.
Yeah. Yeah. So what can dealers do today? What can dealers do, and what can they talk to their teams about?
I mean, it's the same thing that we always do. I mean, it's continual it's the continual training, continually serving the customer, connecting,
Mm.
engaging, delivering on what you need, as we've talked about, Jen, and working, giving them the experience they want in the vehicle they want. And I talked to you about my daughter earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and her just picking up this vehicle. Really, it's no different. It's just that um, I already know what she needs. I already know what her needs are, and I
Mm-hmm.
know what her qualifications are. I know what her price point is, and all those things, because she's my daughter. I know all those things. But if I didn't know that,
Better ask.
it would have been a different story. But because I know
Mm-hmm.
all those things, and because obviously I have a connection, and she trusts me, I can just say, okay, this is
Really?
this is the day, and this is the car. Now,
Yeah.
that's exactly all we're
What we're,
trying to do
that's
with
right.
every single customer. It's just
And
where we start,
like family.
getting from the start to this is the day and this is the vehicle for you, and that's what we can do.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree on that. You know, it, I come back to the conversation about what you can control.
Yeah.
And so you can control the experience inside the store. Dave nailed that, right? Um, you can control, we've been told for 20 years that merchandising matters. And, getting the right photos and setting the right price point on the vehicles.
Descriptions.
Description is just super, just like it always has been.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the difference, I'll add one final little like data point, right?
Yeah.
Is 55% of the inventory on any dealership's lot on any given day doesn't get seen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's rare circumstances, but a car not seen is going to be a car that lingers and is not going to be sold, at least not as sold as fast as it can. And in today's world, yeah, you can do something about it. There are buyers out there. And it's important actually to, the way a lot of the portals work and everything else, or websites work and things, the cars that actually are the highest demand or meet those right price points and things,
Mm-hmm.
are the ones that are going to have visibility in it.
Mm-hmm.
But 55% of the cars are just not going to get seen and rarely seen and everything else. But you can do something about it today. And so it's important. There's buyers out there, and it's important actually at a VIN level actually start to get demand on cars. You can control that today.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of options available in the marketplace to solve that. So I think, again, to refocus sales, what you do on the floor, your
Mm-hmm.
attitude, your education, and very important. And two is, stand up your inventory and make it a scene in the marketplace.
Mm.
And I can see it. The reason I know those work is I measure the performance of every single dealership in the country. And I look at actually what are the ones that actually are succeeding the most, that have the highest sell down rate and most efficient sales and stock ratios. And unequivocally, that's the secret to their success and how they move up in market share, given all things equal, economics and all that stuff.
Hmm. Well, I've seen a lot of this data and I've dialed into it, and I know what you're talking about, and not to, go through all the nuts and bolts of it, but you're right. What I notice a lot of times is that advertising budgets will go heavy on certain cars, particularly the cars that are popular and probably going to move. But if you really look on a VIN level to see your exposure on every single vehicle and how the market is, how they're being exposed to the market, you'll find that you can control that, right? You can move some of that around and even market it in areas where maybe you have a better population for that particular car. This is important for dealers too, because when you notice your days of supply changing, or you see that we've got certain brackets of used cars that are sitting here that we can't move and we got to get rid of them. It may not be your market, but I can still advertise it on a VIN level to areas that might have a little bit more traction. And,
Yes.
and I've watched a lot of my clients do stuff like this, so I know what you're talking about. It is something you can control, just like
But
you can control the sales process too.
yeah, you can actually. And so if you do those things, the sales side, the execution on the floor, and these other parts and everything else. It doesn't matter what happens in an economy, because if you do these things, chances are most of the people around you don't do it.
Yeah.
And you're going to move up in market share. You're going to actually succeed. So sales may be down, but you're actually going to be losing, may say, less sales than you might have otherwise and everything else. The goal is actually, always to improve profitability, but actually it's also to outperform the marketplace. And certainly there's a lot of things, and nothing tests you more than, bad news in the, happening with like the war, interest rate. The number one thing I'm scared about is the Feds make a stupid mistake and actually up interest rates. That's probably the number one thing I'm worried about. But, no matter what's thrown at you, do those main things and so forth, you're still going to succeed, at least succeed better than you might have otherwise.
Well, thank you guys for the dynamic conversation today and getting it from both perspectives. It's interesting, Data is very interesting, and it's good to know and be aware. And there's things that our sales teams should know and that's going on and impacts the questions that customers have and how they navigate that at the same time in preparation for how we're going to move cars and looking at our ad budgets and how we promote certain cars that aren't doing so well. I mean, you wouldn't know to do those things unless you were able to look at the data that's out there. At the same time, the strike makes its impact in different ways. And for me, I always say, be prepared for anything, make sure you're asking the right questions, make sure you're mindful of what is happening with the consumers and affordability. And you can modify your questions and your needs assessment and your process. You can modify your ad budgets. You can do all these things to tackle, what's happening right now and plan for the future. And anyways, I appreciate both of you guys just sharing, what you got going on right now. These are your worlds of expertise, and bringing them together is kind of fun.
Dave, I wish you a very profitable path towards the end of the year. So good luck.
Yep.
Good
Same to
seeing
you.
Jen, good seeing you.
Same to you, Jen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
You take care.
If you like these episodes and my sales game techniques, you should snatch up our latest dealer education program I'm hosting. It's called Jen's Remote Classes, and it's a 1-hour, once-a-week class with me alongside other dealerships, all pursuing the same end game to achieve top 10% status in your dealership. For more info, hit me up. All my contact info's in the show notes. I want to hear from you. And follow Dealer Talk with Jen Suzuki right now to get notified when episodes like this one drop. This is Jen on the podcast Dealer Talk with Jen Suzuki. See ya!